Mendel believed that every trait was controlled by two factors, and that each parent contributed one factor for each trait. In Mendel's pea plant experiments, one parent plant contributed a factor for tallness, and the other parent plant contributed a factor for shortness. But one factor showed up more than the other. How do you think Mendel explained this? Mendel proposed the principle of dominance. The principle of dominance states that one factor in a pair may prevent the other factor in the pair from showing up. Mendel called the factor that kept the other factor in the pair from showing up the dominant factor. Mendel called the factor that was kept from showing up the recessive factor. In Mendel's pea plants, the factor for tallness was the dominant factor, while the factor for shortness was the recessive factor. The factor for yellow seeds was dominant over the factor for green seeds. The factor for green seeds was the recessive factor. And the factor for smooth seeds was dominant over the factor for wrinkled seeds. Wrinkled seeds were the recessive factor. Mendel believed that if a dominant and a recessive factor combined, only the dominant factor would appear in the offspring. But, although the recessive factor would be masked, it was still there. Mendel believed recessive traits such as shortness or green seeds in the pea plant appeared only when both factors which control the trait were recessive. How do you think Mendel believed offspring would look if two dominant factors, such as tallness in the pea plant, combined? Would the offspring show the dominant trait or the recessive trait? The dominant trait, of course. Today, scientists call these factors genes, and they represent genes with symbols. Capital letters are always used to represent the dominant gene. The recessive gene is represented by the small letter of the same letter used to represent the dominant gene. Since the dominant trait in the pea plant, tallness, is represented by a capital T, the recessive trait of shortness is represented by a small t. Mendel still had to explain how a trait such as shortness, that disappeared in the first generation, reappeared in the next generation.